Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ranjit Paul, and I'm the Group Director with Informa Markets in India, and I'll also be your host for today. First of all, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome you all to the first of the Tri-Series webinar being organized by Informa Markets under the aegis of INMEX SMM India. INMEX SMM India is India's largest maritime event held biannually, jointly organized by Informa Markets and Hamburg Messe und Congress. The 2021 edition in December will be the 12th edition of INMEX SMM India and will welcome exhibitors and visitors over 3 days and will be complemented by conferences and targeted B2B programs. Let's have a quick look at the INMEX SMM video.
The type of response which the world is giving to this exhibition is already showing that Indian maritime industry is picking up. There can be new B2B transactions which can take place through these exhibitions, and they're very, very useful.
It compares favorably with the largest maritime conferences and exhibitions anywhere in the world. So in that sense, it brings us a lot of pride that such an event is happening in our, backyard.
Objectives basically are here to come here and understand the advancements and the innovations in the shipping industry. And it was a great opportunity to network with the big names of the industry, and we really liked it here.
Excellent opportunity to meet our customers, where we have the opportunity to exchange information here on our stand and see actually a product outside of a ship.
Quite nice, well organized.
Good work.
Very nice. It was well managed.
Everything is fantastic.
To tell you a little bit about Informa Markets in India, we are a part of Informa PL, which is a leading international events, intelligence and scholarly research group where our purpose is to champion the specialist. Our portfolio is comprised of more than 550 international B2B events and brands in markets including healthcare and pharmaceuticals, infrastructure, construction and real estate, marine, fashion and apparels, gems and jewelry, hospitality, food and beverage, health and nutrition, among others. Informa is listed on the London Stock Exchange and a member of the FTSE 100 with colleagues working in more than 30 countries. Our webinar today is on marine renewable technology, a hot topic in the maritime sector given the decarbonization issues. As stakeholders in the arena grapple with the challenges of decarbonization, automation, and allied areas, there is a pressing need to have a common and niche networking platform to share and exchange knowledge, innovation, development, solutions, and experience. We are happy to welcome a galaxy of eminent panelists for this webinar, to include Mr. Sanjay Sethi, IAS Chairman, Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, Mr. Jayant Singh, IRTS Vice Chairman, Inland Waterways Authority of India, Mr. Jyotisman Das Gupta, Vice President, Arush Gas Technology Services, Rear Admiral G.K. Harish, VSM, Director General, Naval Design, Indian Navy, Mr. Sandip Tandesheri, CEO, Naval Solar and Electric Boats. Before I introduce our moderator for today, I would like to inform all our audience today that there will be a dedicated Q&A session for about 10 to 15 minutes after the panel discussion is over. So please reserve your questions at the end of the session and post it under the Q&A tab. Today's panel session will be moderated by Retired Commander Thomas Phillip, who is the Associate Director for the Aerospace and Defense with KPMG India. A few words about Mr. Phillip. Prior to joining KPMG, Mr. Phillip was involved in infrastructure consultancy projects and project management related to various marine and port projects, such as the development of shipyards, port marine infrastructure, hydraulic studies related to linking rivers and flood mitigation, development of international cruise terminals and inland waterways transportation. Mr. Phillip has overall professional experience of more than 22 years with the Indian Armed Forces and the corporate sector. He is adept at projects related to defense infrastructure and marine projects. He has been part of a design team developing the concept, design, and equipment technical specification, the first nuclear submarine building project, INS Arihant. Having completed 21 ship repair projects, been part of indigenous aircraft carrier building projects, he has an in-depth knowledge in the field of ship repair, building, and management of shipyards. He is also at present involved in developing the aerospace and defense market entry strategies for several MSMEs and Tier 3 companies. Mr. Phillip holds a BTech degree in mechanical engineering from the Naval College of Engineering with the specialization in marine engineering. He also holds an MTech degree in the design engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. Additionally, he has also completed the executive postgraduate program certificate in operations management with IIM Kozhikode. I would now like to invite team moderator, Mr. Thomas Phillip, to take over and conduct the session.
Thanks a lot, Ranjit, for that introduction. And I do hope that we have the next INMEX happening face to face. I do miss the lovely environment that we get to experience in your exhibition. So let's hope and pray that the worst is behind us and we see each other face to face very soon than we actually all expect for. So a very good evening to all the esteemed guests who have joined online for this webinar organized as part of the INMEX. My introductions have been done by Ranjit, so I'll not waste too much of time on that. Of course, I am Thomas Phillip, an Associate Director with the Aerospace and Defense Practice of KPMG. As part of KPMG, we have been involved in a number of projects such as the Sagarmala, the development of the waterway number 1, and environment, social and governance. ESG is a fundamental tenet for all the projects that we do for our clients. So I'm also happy to share that as part of the A&D practice, we are doing certain marquee projects like the OEB corporatization, which you have been reading in the newspapers. We are also present in both the defense corridors in Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh, and we are also developing business and growth strategy for more than one DPSU, Tier 1 companies and MSMEs today. So at the outset, I thank the organizers to have chosen such an apt topic as part of the seminar today, which is centering on the use of renewable energy in the shipping and inland transportation. So we are always in awe of technology that we see around us, and it's like a transformation of ideas which we probably read as kids in books of sci-fi, books of Eskimo, right from mobile communication to private space travel. But all this has come at a cost that partly we will be paying for in our lifetime. And if we leave it unchecked, there's a huge price our next generation will be paying for this kind of a development that we are moving forward with. So it's important for mariners like us to take this subject seriously and imbibe the technologies that are not only reducing carbon footprint, but also adopt technology that is in harmony with nature, which we share with many of other species today. So without much ado, I move to the onerous task of introducing the esteemed panelists who have taken time out today to share their thoughts and the work that is being done by them in this most important aspect of making marine and inland water transportation greener and safer for the future. So I begin with Sanjay Sethi, IAS Chairman, Jawaharlal JNP. Shri Sanjay Sethi is an IAS officer of the Maharashtra cadre of the 1992 batch. He did his masters in economics from London School of Economics, and in Jan 2019 he's joined joined as the chairman to the India's premier container port JNPT, and during his service of more than 27 years with the government of Maharashtra, Mr. Sethi handled key roles in various portfolios such as CEO of MIDC, Additional Metropolitan Commissioner of MMRDA, Additional Municipal Commissioner BMC. He also was the managing director of the Maharashtra State Electricity Transmission Corporation Limited. Also, he has handled mega infrastructure projects such as the Mumbai Metro, development of the Coastal Ring Road, urban water supply and sewage management system, and was also responsible for a large amount of foreign investments into the state. So at JNPT, he is presently working towards the modernization of the port through latest innovations. And in just a matter of 18 months, JNPT has undertaken various steps to convert this leading port of India into a smart, sustainable and customer-friendly port. Now, some of the recent initiatives such as ease of doing business, implementation of ITR-HO at port terminals of JNPT, and introduction of logistics services provider services for competitive logistics at the port, web-based port entry system, etc. have significantly contributed in improvement of KPI of the port at par with the global standards and have resulted in over reduction of cost and time at the port. Even during the pandemic season, despite all the challenges, JNPT has been working without any pause, and the efforts of JNPT to keep all operations on with due care on health and welfare of the port of employees and associated staffs are well appreciated by the trade and ministry sir. So welcome to the panel discussion today evening, Sethi sir. So we also have the privilege of having Vice Chairman Inland Waterways Authority of India (IWI), and he's also the project director of Jal Marg Vikas Project, Shri Jayan Singh. He's a 1993 batch officer of the Indian Railways Traffic Service (IRTS). So he also holds an MPhil degree in Strategy and Security Studies from the National Defence College, New Delhi, MSc in Public Management and Governance from the London School of Economics, and he completed his graduation and post-graduation in History from St. Stephen's College in New Delhi. He also has been Joint Secretary at the National Security Council Secretariat and the Prime Minister's Office from 2016 to 19, and he has held various assignments across the sector, including Chief Traffic, Planning Manager, Northwest Railway at Jaipur, General Manager, Container Corporation of India, Director in the Ministry of Railways. Now, a very warm welcome to Jayan sir today. Good evening, sir. Of course, this discussion would have been incomplete without the representation from our industry. So we have among us today Mr. Jyotishman Dasgupta and Mr. Sandeep Tandasheri. Both are naval architects who have been playing an evangelist role in the use of renewable energy in the marine field. So Mr. Dasgupta is an experienced shipbuilder and oil and gas professional who has spent a considerable part of his career with the IRS, where he grew up to be the chief surveyor looking after the R&D sector. He is presently engaged with Messrs. Arush Gas Technology, Ahmedabad, as founder since 2016, and he leads a team of engineers in technology development and engineering solutions for LNG terminals and all the floating LNG and LPG solutions. He also, in his previous role with Larsen & Toubro, he has held roles like head of the Upstream Marine Group, L&T Hydrocarbon Engineering Limited, and was also the CEO of L&T Valdale Engineering Bangalore and head of floating system business. A warm welcome to you, Jyotishman sir, today evening. And Sandeep is the founder of Navgati Marine X-Ship Analytics and Navalt Solar and Electric Boats. We are all aware that the solar ferry boat Aditya from his stable has been creating a large waves in the sector of passenger ferry using solar energy and has been successfully operating for the last 4.5 years. I'm sure that we shall all be enlightened today evening by his first-hand experience sharing for today evening. So a very warm welcome to you, Sandeep, and I'm sure that we have met Sandeep in large number of forums other than this also. He is an avid speaker on this topic. So a warm welcome to you also, sir. So with that, we start the discussion with our panelists for the evening. So I'll start with Sanjay sir, because that is where all it starts. Yes, from the ports. Sir, thanks a lot for sparing your time today. So my question to start the discussion is that ports have come a long way in operational efficiency and managing marine pollutions. So it's but natural that ports take the first step in moving away from fossil fuels for port operations. In this regard, we will be delighted to hear from you what are the steps being instituted at the Ministry of Shipping and JNPT in particular for turning out the ports to greener technology. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, and a very good evening to you all again. I think as far as the Ministry of Shipping is concerned, this year in March, the Honorable Prime Minister unveiled the Maritime India Vision. The Maritime India Vision talks about what all we are going to do in the next 10 years or so, which in turn have been converted into actionable plans, which is to say that it does not stop at making statements, but we also have plans and even projectizing them. So in terms of the renewables, the target there is that the current share of renewable use in our ports is less than 10%, and this we are targeting at 60% by 2030. Now in this, of course, currently most of it is understood as use of solar energy or the rooftop solar panels that we use. So as far as JNPT is concerned, we currently use almost 30% of solar for our overall energy use. And whatever we are doing right now, which is work in progress, because as a lot of you would know that we have these concessionaires which include DP World and the Maersk, etc. They in turn are also adding capacities to this, which will make us reach almost 40% within this year. So we definitely are on our way to achieving this 60% renewables use within the next 5 to 7 years. Now, this document, the MIV document, also talks about percentage of port equipment electrification, which is currently very meager to up to 50%. Thereby, in fact, we had procured about 31 ERTGCs, what are the rubber tire gantry cranes, which basically means that the total carbon footprint saving per year is, let's say, 3,500 tons. Now, this is an example. We are saying that the terminal that we were operating, if you are replacing this by another energy source, in this case the ERTGCs, the saving is a very clear saving, which can in fact even when you monetize it, you are ultimately saving money as well as you are saving energy and the carbon footprint saving. Now, apart from this, this document talks about adoption of multi-clean fuels, which means electric, CNG, LNG, etc. for vehicles in the port ecosystem. In fact, just a few days back, we inducted 9 e-vehicles for use of our own officials within the port. In fact, by chance, that very day, even Tuticorin port started with 2 or 3 vehicles. So, which basically means that the ports are heading towards use of e-vehicles in a big way. Now, apart from that, one very big component of this debate or this exercise has been the shore-to-ship electricity to the vehicles, to the vessels. So now in JNPT, in fact, we already provide shore-to-ship electricity to tugboats, and we are ready with our plan for using it for our coastal berth, because our coastal berth is ready, and that is how we say that we can in a way make it mandatory there. Now some details are being worked out on that, because normally, as we all understand, there is always some counter view to this, but coastal, and then now in a bigger way, we already have some consultant in place to actually use it for the EXIM vessels. So this has been I think this discussion has been going on for quite some time. But I think finally we are at a place or space where this has become a reality and we can actually use it further. Apart from this, when we say at our port, we have a pilot project for using about 20,000 liters of biodiesel per month for the internal tractor-trailer movement. This again is a successful experiment and probably will help us scale it up. Then we also have replaced a 600 HP diesel engine with the 450 HP engines on 7 numbers of our RTGCs. So again here, the calculation of the carbon footprint saving, let's say, is about 243 tons per year. We also have got into a lot of energy efficiency saving or energy efficiency, whereby all our conventional lighting systems have been replaced by LEDs. We also have used these, what is called the BLDC, the brushless, these fans that use this, where about 1500 fans we have got into this, where the energy saving again is considerable. Similarly, using air conditioners of the type where, apart from demand side management, this ultimately leads to energy efficiency in general. This is about saying that what all we are doing. Now, I don't know, depending on the time, I can, you have to stop me whenever you want to.
Yes, I think you have another 2 minutes.
One interesting experiment that I would like to share is the one that we are trying to do, a floating solar system. Now, on the floating solar system, we have seen that at a smaller scale, water bodies have been used, let's say lakes or even, some kind of artificial water bodies. But in a system like this, where we are using the sea for a floating system, what we are doing now is that we had involved IIT, originally TERI, etc. But somehow the viability on paper was not coming really. So what we have now finally done is that, because the original idea was to have some kind of a 5 megawatt plant, but now we are doing a pilot for 1 megawatt. And if we succeed in this, this probably will open up a new chapter of using solar in a floating way. So this is another thing that we have done in JNPT. I think as the discussion carries on, maybe I can add more. I think I have already taken up my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sanjay sir. And I'm very sure that all these small drops of water will add up to the ocean. And fundamentally, all of us feel that what is the difference that I'm going to make by changing myself from just a light bulb, the example of LED that you gave. And I had some experience of working in Cochin Port also, sir. There, since we were doing some jetty work, we had already made provisions for the shore supply cables to be aligned there. So I think going forward, this concept of shore supply, yes, it does have its challenges in terms of the frequency matching and the kind of end connectors that we need for that. But I think that these are minor challenges concerned with the benefits that we might accrue over the years. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing. I'm very sure that moving forward, a mega port like JNPT will become carbon neutral probably much before than anybody else in the countries.
Just one line I want to add here, that we are working on this new port called the Vadhavan port. So what we are saying is that at the planning stage, when we are doing the project development, we at least have the aspiration or the ambition to have a carbon neutral thing, whereby from the beginning, which means that whatever technologies come in, whatever is being used to done, that makes sure that we can call it a green port in the true sense. So in fact, a lot is being worked. We also have some kind of a tie-up with the Oslo port, who are also helping and guiding us with that. That was just to inform the audience.
So that is a very important aspect. So to become carbon neutral, I think we have to start at the drawing boards. So while we might do a lot of retrofitments in the existing infrastructure, but going forward, like the initiative that probably you have taken for one of your upcoming ports, I think even if the initial capex might be slightly on the higher side, but over the years, as far as the running costs go, I think it will get amortized and it will be a huge savings that we will accrue in terms of the carbon footprints. Thank you so much. So, sir, my next question moves to the aspect of inland water transport. Now, inland water transport is going to be the game changer in the field of cargo and personal movements. I had the good fortune of having been interacting with IWI very closely in some of my projects earlier. So what was brought out to me is that the aspect of water transport using inland waterways should not be seen as a competitor to other means of transport, but it should be as an enabler by becoming an efficient link in the whole chain to reduce the overall carbon footprint in the complete logistics chain of moving man and material. So instead of wasting or investing too much of time in trying to compare how much energy is saved by moving cargo by water, I think the focus was to become a part of the complete chain and reduce the overall footprint rather than looking at in a piecemeal way. So there has to be a holistic approach. So Jayant sir, you have been in this field for quite some time now. So we would like to hear from you as to what is the IWA's vision in contributing to this complete logistical supply chains.
Thank you, Commander Phillips, and very good evening to all the participants and those who have logged on. And I think our last point that you made actually sums it all up. I mean, whenever we look at logistics, we should not be addressing a mode in particular. There has to be intermodal complementarity, and the viability of one mode is actually meaningless unless it actually adds value to the overall supply chain. Now, coming specifically to inland water transport, which is what we're looking at here, of course, this is a very, very fast growing sector, and I find the numbers and the CAGR very, very impressive, so that looks good on the CV and all. The fact remains that both in terms of actual traffic that we are handling and in every sense of the word, actually we are still at infancy when it comes to technology, when it comes to the actual throughput. And we, unlike railway, which is my parent organization, and even the shipping sector, both the regulatory architecture that is there in place, the regulatory architecture, the institutional arrangements that are there to govern the sector are very, very nascent, and still it is very much a work in progress. And herein lies the salience of the seminar also, because coming that it is in the backdrop of the IPCC prediction, that dire warning yesterday. I think it's time we actually sit down and collectively apply our mind to the various issues, that the red flag that they have put up. So coming specifically here, I won't, ad nauseum, whenever you hear IWT and then waterways, they're talking about what is the quantum of emission, how it is efficient by factor of 3 or factor of 4 when it comes to conventional transport. But I'll come to something more specific. See, we have to first get the systems, etc. in place. So first step has been taken. We just had the passage of the Inland Vessels Act in the Parliament, and this was also a long time. It's been on for a long time, 3 to 4 years, and finally it is through. So we are coming up with a whole lot of rules and regulation on standardization of vessels, the emission standard, the maintenance standard, so on and so forth. So that would once and these rules that we are going to formulate, we are in the process of actually formulating, are based on a lot of detailed discussions and deliberation with the stakeholders. So that is going to be one long-term thing. So if we're starting ab initio, we have that advantage that we can now have those rules which are amenable and which are actually promoting the use of green technology. So we don't have any legacy issues as far as the rules, etc. are concerned. So that's one thing. So the Inland Vessels Act. And the second thing we're actually looking at, this to me the major challenge. So I'm glad there are participants from the industry here. My biggest challenge in inland waterways is that kind of the commodity profile that it has, it's actually a very low-end kind of traffic, the bulk traffic that it is carrying. So the costing becomes very, very critical. So any adoption of technology that increases the cost renders not only the sector unviable, the whole industry will then back off. We are trying to now solicit investments by the private sector in the vessels and in terminals, and it has not been easy. So it's a kind of a double whammy. On the one hand, we want private sector, we want more and more operators to come in. We are going for very innovative PPP modes to get participants. But on the other hand, this green technology and its cost, we haven't really done the number crunching yet, but it is turning out to be a deterrent. So this is one dilemma that the sector is facing. And and it's so ironical, most of the cargo that I'm carrying on waterways today is actually contributing to, or is an end product of fossil fuel. So I'm carrying coal upstream and downstream I'm carrying fly ash. I shouldn't be talking too much about it, but be that as it may, there are 3 or 4 areas where definitely there is a lot of scope for technology enhancement, and what we are doing, I'll probably address that in the second part. First is, of course, the vessel design. Now, and I'll tell you here the practical dilemma of a policy intervention. And Mr. Sanjay Sethi is a very distinguished alumnus of the place where I did my master's from with distinction. Of course, he graduated, and he being a master of logistics and infrastructure probably appreciated more than others. Now, vessel design was something we thought probably shipyards or private sector would not like to go by itself, invest money in that area in itself. So we engaged some experts from Germany, and we had these vessel designs and all in place. We've uploaded them onto our website. And to my knowledge, not a single vessel has been manufactured in this country using that design. It's simply not viable. But that is one area we are definitely looking at some sort of interventions, and I'm lucky that the designer or the manufacturer of the solar ferry, Aditya, is here. Probably he'll be able to throw a little more light onto this. The second is about the terminals that we are designing, and here at least there are some low-hanging fruits. Mr. Sethi also described use of green technology as far as the consumption of power within the port is concerned. So in all our modern terminals that we are designing, all our multimodal, intermodal terminals, there's a lot of, in fact, our target is that 1/3 of that power consumption should come from solar. And we are very much well on our way to doing that. The second and small intervention that we've made, I'd like to just touch upon a few. One is that, for example, when we have this work in progress, we try to avoid the use of DG to the extent possible. We draw power from the state electricity grid right from the start. That really helps. So that is one way that we are doing. And then small things. Use of dump barges. We still haven't reached the scale, the kind of inland navigation that you'll see on Scheldt or you'll see on the Rhine or Danube. But still, we are encouraging the use of dump barge technology because most of our products are, those bulk carriers which are very amenable to this kind of transport. So these are the couple of things that we had in mind. And LNG, definitely, I'd be very keen on learning more about the LNG-based vessels, because now the next step after terminals and developing waterways would be to encourage manufacture or acquisition of vehicles, and there probably how we marry the LNG technology given our existing supply chain would be something I'll be very keenly watching. And otherwise, there are, of course, in case of passenger transport, there are 78 hybrid electric boats that I think Cochin Shipyard is manufacturing. And this is some sort of a JV, Cochin Metro and Cochin Shipyard Limited for the National Waterway 3. And then we have Ro-Ro vessels coming in with lithium ion technology. So these are something that we are trying. Again, I would say these are baby steps, but we have to work on 3 fronts. A, having a regulatory architecture in place. B, making that technology viable. See if we can do any viability gap funding. And then C, making sure that when we do all this, it does not deter the potential investors and the users of inland. These are 3 areas. I don't have answers. In fact, my talk is more about posing questions than offering answers. But I'll be very happy to hear from the actual people from the scientific fraternity what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jayant sir. I think, as you said, you have posed more questions than probably answering. Because I think as far as the inland water transport goes in the country itself, I think there is a long way for us to probably travel. And I was also part of a boating manufacturing company for some time. And we were actually developing a solar boat, and we actually could not find even classrooms that are exactly matching to the requirements of the clients. So what is the kind of safety that might be required? And as far as common grid for regulations of registering boats is concerned, I think the lesser we talk about, the better it is as of date, sir. I'm very sure there is a lot of action that is happening with the integrated vessel registration happening now. So thank you so much, sir. And I think moving forward, we can see that this is going to be the future. I was also fortunate to have been part of the Kochi Water Metro project for some time, and some of the terminals are now getting inaugurated, and I think the boats are being manufactured in Cochin Shipyard Limited. But again, most of the technology as far as the power trains go is of the import nature. So there's a huge market that is available for all of us to work together as far as the marine propulsion powertrains go in this sector. So I'm not an expert on this. Sandeep is actually smiling when I'm talking like this. So I'll probably move on to the next questions. My next question is to Mr. Dasgupta. So you have been in the field of shipbuilding and now in LNG also. In your experience, we already know that there are passenger ferries which are now operating on hybrid engines fueled by LNG in the European waters and all. But as far as the Indian space is concerned, what do you feel are the challenges both that are being faced both by the shipbuilders to build and of course the fleet owners to transform into the LNG-based hybrid engines for the fleet? So, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Philip, for the kind words and very nice introduction to the topic of today's discussion. And thank you very much for the important question. I think we all know that the world today is at a very crucial moment, shifting from Industry 2.0 that brought in manufacturing and trading revolution along with the industrial pollution. And we have embarked on Industry 4.0 with net zero target by 21st century, possibly much before 2100. The future of shipping, both in inland and international shipping, is also going to change with clear mandate and a stepwise pathway to achieve these targets. The stark projection for the climate change has been released by IPCC only last night, and we all understand that the Earth needs resuscitation. Virtually every nation is now on a similar platform, seeking solutions. Challenges are there for everyone, and so are the opportunities. It is for us to decide whether we want to get bogged down with the challenges or be inspired by the opportunities. I am not going to go through the IMO mandates and the guidelines to all the professionals attending this discussion. Let me start with LNG, which was conceived as a clean and cheap fuel, readily available and cleaned of all the suspended material and all the impurities. NGTS had commissioned a national survey in 2019 to examine the willingness of the industry to switch to LNG fuel as well as the willingness to pay for it. A majority expressed a willingness to change over to LNG fuel for a very good return on investment. But they were apprehensive on ready availability of LNG. With the government permission to install LNG dispensing stations, many have come forward and we have carried out conversion of long-distance buses and trucks and also mining transport equipment with heavier engines. Unfortunately, ready availability of LNG bunkering has so far been limited to 40. Although we have worked on setting up LNG import and distribution facility at Kakinada in India, I think it's going to take a few years until the time when the ports will have the bunkering facility for ships. For shipbuilding, the rules, regulations and operational procedures with LNG as fuel are very much in place. Shipbuilders' challenges are on availability of ready and economical engines to run on LNG as well as methanol and ammonia. As these fuels have lower energy density per volume, they need more tank volume. The design therefore needs change to accommodate this extra fuel volume. But going forward, the alternate fuel needs to be green fuel synthesized using renewable energy. Institution Naval Architects in its recent technical seminar projected the opportunities of generating renewable energy in the maritime sector. The presentation from Mr. Ramesh Krishnakumar is available on the INA YouTube channel. Engines for LNG and other fuels, the developments are on for three direct matrices of readiness. One is technology readiness level, the second is commercial readiness level, and the third is societal readiness level. In terms of TRL, most major engine manufacturers are comfortable with new two-stroke dual fuel engines with minimum methane slip for LNG engines. But for four-stroke engines, controlling the methane slip is dual fuel engines have been found to be a little bit. Methanol four-stroke engines have been developed with adequate efficiency, and with ammonia the work is perceived to be still on the runway. In terms of commercial readiness level, it is surprising while converting IC engines to run on LNG or methanol is so high. Engine conversion of monofuel engines with new engine control system and conversion kits, they come at a comparatively much competitive price. The societal readiness level, it's good for LNG and methanol. For ammonia fuel, there is a little reluctance because of the toxicity. And there is, of course, the possibility of nuclear fuel for international ships, but obviously it will take a longer time to get acceptance. It is important that the commercial and the societal readiness of alternate fuel IC engines gets developed soon. Now, mitigating the GHG emissions for large fast ships on long transoceanic voyages is through onboard carbon capture. One Indian engineering enterprise, MN Dastur, they have already established credentials for this for power plants. For large container carriers running on fossil fuels, this onboard carbon capture facilities is thought to be an excellent solution catering to all interests. It also opens up the shipping of CO2 carriers, which fetches a good revenue cargo value. There are a large number of LNG fuel new buildings in the order since 2018. Methanol ships are also getting delivered. And actually, to my mind, there is no barrier to running these ships anymore. So that is from the opportunities and challenges point of view. I hope that answers your query.
Excellent, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I'm very sure that we have all been monitoring the oil markets in the last 1 year or so. And we do see that oil as a commodity is heavily challenged as on date. And I'm very sure that moving forward, if cleaner fuels like LNG are going to be used increasingly, given the emissions control that will come into kick in the marine fuel also, I'm personally feeling that there is a huge market that is just waiting down the corner as we improve the safety into the system. And it's going to be a mix of probably natural gas, ethanol, methanol, and of course the other electric propulsion trains that probably is going to be the future for us. So Sandit, coming to you, you have in the face of MSME boat builders who have single-handedly shown the courage to design, build and market a passenger ferry which uses solar power for its electric propulsion. So it's going to be great if you could share some of your experience in the next 5 minutes on this journey of yours.
Thank you, Sri Thomas Philip. So as an entrepreneur, we are bound to come up with solution that makes economic sense. And in marine transport, you know that there is no subsidy in place. What is there in electric vehicles on road? So in that context, I will talk on application of renewable energy and my experience. Now, in like when the Water Transport Department in Kerala wanted to shift from diesel ferry, their reason was, of course, we all think of environmental reason, noise, vibration, smell of fuel, or stability issue, which is one of the reasons why accidents happen in every state. And thankfully now IWA has standardized the rules, which will help a long way in that. So these are important issues, but their main issue is OPEX. So typically in public transport, OPEX is a killer. So if you cannot manage your OPEX, the system is finished. So the diesel propulsion on this ferry boat OPEX was an issue. And our approach has been only to address solutions where that economics we can come up with. So when we did that, we didn't take the existing diesel boat and make it electric propulsion, because that doesn't work. The typical diesel ferry in India, most of them are poorly designed, either heavy because of using steel or wood, or it is poorly designed. This is a nature of the industry, unlike auto industry. So when somebody shift from diesel petrol car to an electric car, there is no increase in improvement of efficiency of the car itself from a design perspective, because they are already well designed by central. Whereas boat building is a very fragmented industry. That's the nature of industry. That is also the reason why we could step in with this huge efficiency gap. When we did our ferry, the weight of the boat dropped from 35 ton to 15 ton or 17 ton almost, and then the power required from 50 kilowatt to 15 kilowatt, and that is when we can talk solar electric from an economic angle. Otherwise, you can talk from a technology, it will not make money. And then again, another important is the powertrain itself. This is not the EV powertrain. Even many times when I discuss with the policy in who are facilitating EV, they fail to understand that the time to escape from a bus is very, very low compared to a boat. So the standards of safety need to be higher. It can't be an EV powertrain system. So when we set out our ferry, there was no rules in play. So we followed what was the standard in Europe, like the Norwegian standard. And now IRS has come up with the standards for the powertrain, which is good. So it is for our own conditions. So we can go for the system and approach. And there was a point mentioned on the technology also. We cannot be a country which is just merely assemblers of technology. We have to develop. When there is a talk of marine technology, there was this mention about design also. IWI, in my view, should have given this with a lot of good designers in India. Like there is an organization called IMDA, Indian Marine Design Association. And then this problem of having a lot of designs but nobody is using it, because there is no connect with what is the local ecosystem need. So we need to have a strong design play in India. We need to have a strong technology play. It can't be like what Cochin Shipyard is doing, is just importing powertrain and installing in a boat which they make. That is not the way forward. We need to own the technology, and that is key if we are serious about being a future in the marine transport system. Else we will be just a labor arbitrage, right? You will get only labor arbitrage work, which is not what we want. Now, in our case, beyond Aditya is already established, 4.5 years. It has transported more than 15 lakh passengers, 1.5 lakh of liters saved. It's a proven case in public transport ferry boat. And today, if anybody builds a diesel ferry boat, he is either really stupid or he is not observing what is happening in the ecosystem. Beyond ferries, there are so many other applications, like Sri Sanjay Sethi mentioned about what vessels in port you can do, like harbor boats, pilot boats, tugs. All these kind of vessels are already shifting to electric as an example, in different part of the country. Today we are building for Mazagon Dockyard a high-speed solar electric boat for harbor movement purpose. That's going to be the fastest solar boat in Asia. So there are so many possibilities in that space beyond the land-based solar and beyond the electricity shift to solar. That is really an easy problem, just driven by the land availability. Because already we know that land-based is proven. It's the transport-based energy which is where the play is still open, and that is where I hope we will all play a role. And then the hydrogen fuel cell is again where the battery comes with a constraint. It is the fuel cell which come into play, and there it's not a technology play. Already technology is proven. There are so many fuel cells running for 20 year, 30 year, like Mirai and all. But it is a cost of compressed liquid hydrogen. Today it's at USD 15, which is equivalent to saying like the petrol is almost USD 1. So that is a scale. So it has to come to 2 to 3, because hydrogen being more efficient fuel in terms of calorific value, $2 to $3 is what it needs. IOC has said they will bring the green hydrogen in that. Then it will take off the passenger, yes, and all the port movement, yes, Ro-Ro, yes, cargo movement only in short haul. For example, in port means from 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers across, there clearly yes, but not the long haul. From Haldia to Varanasi, no. So it has to then go to some liquid fuel or LNG as an entry. This is overall my view. But in the large ships, solar for auxiliary only, wind for propulsion, almost 20%. Now already projects are in play for the suction sail, rotary sail, many technologies in play. Unfortunately, we don't have any hand-holding for working on frontier technologies. That is also I'm saying, because in EU, there is an EU grant for these things. We don't have. This is something if policy can work on it. Then we can experiment on these wind solutions, which will tomorrow play a very big role in commercial ships. Yeah, this is my take. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjit. I think I could not emphasize more that any such change probably should happen at the design stage itself. Even for the boards that probably we are doing now, we are using the photovoltaic cells, which are generally being used in commercial applications in buildings and all. But there are panels that are available which are flexible, can take the contour of the boat itself. And you can have all the surfaces being utilized at any point of time, generating energy. So as you very rightly pointed out, that probably we cannot have a quick fix solution to this particular transition, and success of the whole initiative probably will depend on both the private and the public sector moving into technology development and moving away from this build to print aspect altogether. But then we all have economics to take care of, and it's not easy probably to invest, look for returns when you are probably reaching your grave. So I think there is a long way again, which we probably will see in the future. So that naturally takes me to the question of economics of going green, sir. So Sanjay sir, this is for you, so that we all understand that majority of the green technologies is in terms of the commercial market, a lot of desire in terms of subsidies and support from the government of India, like the way it has come in the form of the FAME framework for the EVs. So since you are part of the larger decision-making machinery also, so will we be seeing some similar moves in the marine and the inland water transportation looking forward? Sanjay sir, for you.
Okay, I think if you are saying whether there is any such dispensation currently, well, there is none. I mean, if you're saying there is, Sandeep just said there is no hand holding and we need to do more. There are those examples where probably Port of Rotterdam gives a 15% discount on liquid bulk carriers who have a green award certificate or something. Those are those kind of examples which are generally given. Now, in this context, what's happening currently is that as far as policy making is concerned, there is a current group on blue economy, which some of you might be a part of, I don't know. But I happen to head one of the groups which is talking about finance in general, but of course, setting up of a maritime development fund, the insurance issues, and also the subsidy issues. Now, the problem there is that when when the Ministry of Finance representative comes and says, well, we already are talking about a DFI, why do you need a separate fund? And normally our stakeholders from shipping and the the related stakeholders would say that either we are not considered an infrastructure there, and our specialized needs must get attention somewhere. It's not so simple to just say that the cost or the tenor will be the same, or whether it will not be the same, but the kind of attention we need is a separate or a specialized attention. Now there, what I'm afraid is, of course, that platform we all can use, and right now is the right time. In fact, if either the panelists or even the participants, if they have some suggestions on this, where then we are talking about subsidies there, and we are talking about GST concessions and things like that. We have managed to involve all the right stakeholders there. So what happens there is, for some reason, this whole energy sphere is still the domain of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. But let's say if at the higher level, when the Secretary Shipping is a part there, probably we could propose some of it coming from that ministry, but can become a recommendation from this side. So we could try and do that. At the port level, as you all are aware now, there will be a much more autonomy or independence in terms of the tariff setting. So thereby the individual ports also probably have a better space in terms of giving discounts, especially for their own terminals, but even for the other terminals who where the concession agreements are not coming in afresh now. All the others, their tariffs will still need to be decided by the boards, which basically means that if we can attach some importance to these kind of things and link something there, these are the two things I can right now think off my hat, in the sense that let's use the blue economy group for a larger policy input, where when we are talking about subsidies or we are talking about separate funds, we could be putting in this component, and also try and see what we can get from the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. And at the port level, we could, again, even as not just as advocacy, but even as targets now as a part of MIV, it has been given to the ports that you must reach here. So, which basically means that till the time you will get into some incentivization. Because again, it's if I just say here that, for putting up some infrastructure, we should give this kind of incentive, which probably I cannot give. I mean, that may not be a very realistic thing, but these are the 2 or 3 lines I can think of, but I'm open to more suggestions on this, because this whole blue economy group is a very good platform to use this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think your opening statement pretty much covered that. Probably as far as the marine space goes, it's of course like a second cousin to the EV space as of now, and I'm very sure that with the group that we are discussing today and the guests who have joined today for this thing, I'm very sure that some positive points will probably emerge, which could be taken at the ministry level at the appropriate forum, and we could look at some positive subsidies and support coming from the government side. to promote this whole technology adoption in the sector. So, Sir Jain sir, the next question is that inland waterways has been one of the focus areas of the government of India in the recent years, and we are all aware that the large focus is being given on developing safer boats, especially in sectors where inland navigation is already active. We all know that the large number of inland water terminals are in the offing. So, as Sanjay sir had brought out earlier, why don't we probably you're already looking at that, since these are going to be, most of them are going to be greenfield projects. So, are there any initiatives from IWS side to put certain conditions into place when we design these terminals and probably onboard the EPC contractor, that probably you start with carbon neutral operations itself, so that moving forward these terminals become something which can be emulated by a lot of others to follow.
Yeah, you're right. Most of the big terminals being greenfield projects. So ab initio, there are a lot of things inbuilt in the design, both in terms of the way the operation, the terminals etc. are constructed and designed. So as I said, there is a lot of accent emphasis on solar and everything, and probably right now the terminal that we have, we can definitely insert a clause, as Mr. Sethi just mentioned about what Rotterdam is doing, it is incentivizing vessels that are actually adopting this technology. Now the carrot, it has to be carrots only, it can't be stick. Like in motor vehicles, we are saying we'll scrap vehicles beyond 10 and 15 years. This won't do. If I were to do that, my entire India-Bangladesh trade is going to come to a total standstill. Similarly, if we were to impose these strict regulations on the vessels plying on River Mandavi and Zuari and all that, everything will come to a standstill. So it has to be a set of incentives. Now, what are the incentives that we have in place? Well, as I mentioned about terminals, yes, these are there in green technology. We are mainly constructing terminals and handing them over for operation and maintenance. So at the construction stage itself, we are taking care of this. Even our small terminals have a good quality sewage treatment plant. So these things we are definitely taking care of. But what I'm actually most worried about is the fact that the existing fleet of inland vessels that we have, IWAI owns very few. I have total inventory, including all barges, tugboats, survey vessels, etc. They're just about 120 odd. In fact, I intend scrapping most of them as we go along. So what we can do is probably when we augment the fleet, we start with these green vessels so they can have a good demonstration effect. So I'm glad, the biggest journey from today's, discussion has been about these solar vessels by Sandeep. I'd like to get in touch with the Indian Marine Design Association. Let's see what all designs they have in place. And secondly, whether or not projects like Aditya can be upscaled or not. So if we start with a place where we are having a lot of ferry operations, like on Hooghly, on Brahmaputra, and then subsequently upstream areas, reaches of inland of National Waterway 1 and all the RoRo operations. So we can definitely mandate that. In fact, we are in the process of designing a good concession agreement or some sort of a model where we can actually either give subsidy at the beginning or do some sort of a viability gap funding model yet to come across. Because actually IWI, the problem is that my mandate is very limited. The Act limits my mandate to maintaining waterways and doing some sort of infrastructural work, not to operate vessels. At the same time, because there is no ecosystem, all states have their own rules, a lot of hand-holding is required. So yeah, definitely we will be looking at the design dimension, definitely at purchase dimension. And Sandeep, if we can upscale the thing of your solar ferries, this could be a game changer, definitely. And you talked about the upscale. Optics are very, very important here, the demonstration effect. So luckily, our minister is coming from Assam, and Assam we have a lot of these ferry operations. So probably next stage we will be buying about half a dozen of them to operate on Brahmaputra. But here, let me tell you one more thing. Another challenge that we have, the institutional challenge. There are very few people, there are very, very few players who are actually in the business of operating and maintaining cargo vessels or RoPax vessels or RoRo vessels. We bought 2 very good quality RoPax vessels. We didn't have the mandate to operate them. We requested UP Tourism to run it. UP Tourism themselves could not. Luckily, we found an operator. So we have to create everything. I mean, the whole system of training, standardization. It's a big challenge, but then the advantage is we have no legacy issues. We can take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So I'm very sure that while the mandate of IWI is maintenance of the waterways only, so as you said, probably whether to use the stick or the carrot, probably we could take the middle ways. I'm also sure there was a lot of initiative that was taken by the West Bengal government to upgrade the boat booties that operate in the Brahmaputra and all. And there was a design of the boat also that was shared with most of the boat manufacturers. But I've not seen anything happening in that space thereafter.
No, but a lot will be happening with the IV Act now. IV Act has a lot of enabling provisions. So that would definitely, in the next 1 or 2 years, we'll definitely see a lot of movement along this line.
So absolutely, since the roadway and the waterways are owned by you, so probably you could enforce that the vessels which do not conform to at least the bare minimum emission requirements are not plied at all, and there will be some enforcement that will be required from the state governments in this aspect. And of course, incentivize those who are operating the greener technologies. So thanks a lot, sir. So since we have representatives from industry side today, so it will be prudent to ask both Mr. Dasgupta and Sandip as to what are the wish list. I believe as part of our discussion, some of them have already been covered. So since we are slightly running on time, late on time also, so if both of you said quickly, if you have some wish list which probably could be expressed as part of this panel discussion today. Very quickly, sir, if you could just list them out. So starting with Dasgupta, and then Sandip, you can take on.
I would just like to add what Sandip said. You can find out kind of a form of metrics in which you can identify what is the total energy requirement to be stored during the voyage and what is the total amount of voyage requirement, and thereby decide as to what kind of fuel you wish to use. So thereby, for long distance, we would possibly require carrying large amount of cargo. We would require to have, liquid fuels kind of thing. Well, in terms of the list, I would like to go according to our age-old PDCA cycle of implementation, and let us look at it from the planning point of view. We cannot control anything that we don't make up. Inventory of the greenhouse gases, which are prepared by many countries as an effective tool to manage their own environment, are measured, and these are under international reporting obligations under the Paris Accord. In India, this is done by National Inventory Management System, NMIS. NMIS collects their GHG data through NATCOM and produces to MOEF. Unfortunately, under the TERI report, the data collection does not include data from maritime sectors, that is from shipyards, ports, inland and coastal shipping and international shipping. This left to companies, civil societies and professional bodies to monitor and project these requirements. We need a centralized repository of transparent and reliable GHG data so that the ESG funds which can be mobilized and made accessible to the stakeholders. The total estimated capital challenge to get to net zero is of the order of 50 trillion USD, and Indian maritime sector can find a slice of this pie, provided we provide the transparent data to the ESG fund operators to get this fund. Then the second point is, there are a number of action points which are there for the Indian maritime industry. One is we need to design, produce and install the shipboard GHG emission measurers, analyzers, systems like Portia, P2000 or Semtech, which are required. Energy conversion technology for medium-sized IC engines to run on LNG, methanol, ammonia within India, starting within next 2-3 years, because until about 2030-35, which is going to use a bridging fuel to get down to the renewable energy. We need to have regulatory requirements for speedy approval of converted made engines for mono and dual fuel, hybrid gas electric solutions and powertrains, by Class and Biju Shipping. We can afford to have carbon capture, especially for cryogenic carbon capture and utilization, which can facilitate carbon dioxide as a fuel, which can be used as a synthetic fuel and recycled to be used to a chemical process using catalysis, which is normally called the SMR process, to generate recycled liquid fuel. Then solar powered ferries and small craft, which Sandit, my friend, has covered very well. Battery powered tugs and fishing vessels, wind powered coastal ships. These are all within our hands. It is not necessary for us to get the complete, hand-holding from outside. There is enough literature. Only thing is, somebody has to take the risk to invest in this. The fuel cell technology is a transformation system. And this technology will take some time to get down to the propulsion, but can be used as auxiliary machinery even now. And for that, what we would need is we can possibly utilize the 3D printing, which you're going to hold a seminar on. 3D printing technology to generate fuel cells, and which is definitely possible.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we're again running slightly tight on time. So Sandit, I think before you book a ticket to Delhi to go and talk to Jayant sir in Delhi, you can also just, in case there are any more wish lists that are covered, you could just quickly run it through, because we also have the Q&A session pending now.
Sure, I'll quickly tell. One is from a demand increase. There are a lot of government departments who control a lot of these vessels, like IWA is there, JNPT is there, who can push for 1, 2, 3 vessels of their into the solar electric. This is something that can be done. And there are a lot of eco-sensitive areas like Sundarban, etc., Statue of Unity, where policy has to say that this has to be clean. We all talked about FAME scheme, which doesn't talk of electric boats, it talks of everything else. So something like that should be there. Shipbuilding subsidy, this is what I would wish both Sri Jayant Singh sir and Sanjay sir to talk to Ministry of Shipping. They have already a procedure for reducing the size of vessel for the purpose of subsidy for dredges. So extend the 24-meter constraint, make it 12-meter for solar vessels, then most of the vessels are covered in shipbuilding subsidy. This is already framework is there, just execution. Yeah, this is all I had to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandit.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandeep.
Always bang on point. So I think we have to now probably move to the closing session, sir. Just quick, say 1 minute or 2 minutes, sir, starting with Sanjay sir. Sir, what are your closing remarks for this discussion today?
I think instead of that, if there are a few questions, we could take a question each or something.
Sure, sir. So I think we will move on to the Q&A, because I think it's already 6:50.
I have one closing comment. There is a immediate need to revive the shipbuilding, engine manufacturing and ancillary equipment manufacturing sectors. These are core industry sectors and should be treated differently from trading functions. They promote the revival of the industry and the complete manufacturing industry and a very vibrant contribution to the economy. So that is what needs to be done. And with Industry 4.0 and sustainable maritime pursuits, we need to have the shipbuilding industry and associated ancillary industry in place so that we can get down to the next level of economic development.
If I may just respond to that, in fact, I am a strong advocate of this, and that's why this Maritime Development Fund, which you all know at some level was proposed by the Exim Bank actually, but in the current shape where in fact, Ministry of Finance is in a way opposing it. In fact, they have given it in writing that the DFI proposed by them should take care of this. But we are going ahead with not just recommending it, but also saying that, the fact that, let's say, shipbuilding doesn't get included because it is still not considered infrastructure in DFI, let's say. But more importantly, or most importantly, is that over the years, the specialized requirements have really not been met by the existing, infrastructure, whatever we have in this, so to say. So I think on these 2 points, I would like to say that hopefully this group should be able to push this through. I think that is one part that will take care of this, what you're saying.
I'll just request the audience that we are open for Q&A now. We have one question from Saurabh Kumar Apuri, sir. All vessels, whether seagoing or coastal, gets classification survey annually. Certifications are based on environmental compliance. What additional compliances can be done by surveyors? He's basically asking, is there any additional compliances that could be done as part of the survey requirement? Annual surveys. Dasgupta, so you are ex-IRS, probably you might be able to answer this.
See, the survey procedures for all these kinds of vessels are already in place, and in fact, the codes are also in place. So there is no additional survey requirement from classification or statutory point of view which is required. Only thing is there are measuring equipment which are required. There are all these, the additional things which were coming in, and the new types of fuels and new way of generating power. We need to have the measuring equipment to measure the efficiency and the capacity of these processes. So that is what is required to be done.
So Ranjit, I don't see any more questions in the chat box. I hope I am seeing the correct chat box. Hopefully there is only one. Are there any other questions, Ranjit?
There was one question on tourism sector being promoting solar and as a policy push, which is just related to what I mentioned on the eco-sensitive area, like tourism means like Statue of Unity.
So that's from an anonymous attendee.
No, it's from Mr. Sundar Ramnathan.
I see it as
regarding
anonymous.
economic
Would ecotourism not be a good domain to mandate vessels that run on alternative fuels, solar powered fuels? So I think this, as part of our discussion, we had some discussions on this. So of course, so I think we have got another question from Mr. Sundar. He's asking about my question regarding economic growth. I know how difficult it is to run IWI with so many social and economic challenges. Not very sure what exactly is the question here. So I think we'll leave that for a how many states are covered by
Jayant, it says that your job is very challenging.
I can only nod in agreement. No, on the lighter side, but see,
got an
that is the
alibi.
point. No, it is actually, it's creating the whole ecosystem. From creating infrastructure to formulating rules, setting a whole regulatory system in place, getting the vessels, getting the terminals, everything. It is challenging. You have to move, like parallelly on each front. Like so far, I mean, for good or bad, we have plugged the low-hanging fruit of constructing the terminal without really getting the vessels in place. But I can't get the vessels in place because I don't have the mandate to run the vessels, So we are working on that, but definitely but then that disadvantage I can turn into an advantage by going in for the best to start with. And that is the reason I'm asking, I'll be in touch now with Sandeep to how to upscale. Yeah, certainly. And of course, a lot of collaboration should come from the state, because at the end of the day, the states will be only doing the enforcement and the regulations. So we can only draft. It's like the Motor Vehicles Act.
Actually, as I pointed out, it's a kind of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have LNG truck or bus unless you have LNG dispensing station.
Yeah.
So now that LNG dispensing stations have started coming up, LNG trucks and buses have started moving. So once your terminals are going to be ready and some bunkering facility are ready, I'm sure there will be vessels, because the operating costs are definitely advantageous.
Initial costs are a deterrent. That's the thing.
So we have to get some funds to do it. And
So there's another question from Melvin Matthews. He is basically bringing out the requirement of extending the same scheme to water transport. And of course, he's requested the kind attention in this matter. So I think, Sethi sir, I'll just reiterate what you probably have already said. If a decent points could come from the audience and the panelists here, probably that could be taken up with the ministry, right sir, at the right fruits. So any comments on the IWI 2021 wells? Then sir, that is for you.
So it is actually, it is just it's a very detailed bill, but essentially talking about enabling provisions for having a standardized set of rules for a vessel design, safety standards in terms of design and training and everything, and then operability within states. I was surprised, 1917 Indian Waterways Act was it did not give you the mandate to go from one state to the other. Every state had its different rules. So that sort of standardization is now coming, has now been, with the passage of the bill that has come about. So passage of a vessel from UP traversing through Bihar, Jharkhand into Bengal will become a lot easier. And then all the latest navigation, it's so surprising. I mean, we are at some stage, we are operating at such primitive level. We had the cyclone Yas in May this year. I had to track down the movement of Bangladeshi vessels on Indian waters. Actually, it took me about 36 hours to actually track down each and every vessel. A lot of vessels they don't even have a GPS. So we have this AIS system that has to be installed. So we have to start from scratch. So this standardization, etc., the kind of enabling the legislative framework that was required. This is what the Act is going to give us. That's all I have to say. Then when the rules come out, then everything, of course, will be in public domain. And a lot of that would be happening with stakeholder interaction. IRS has already drafted a set of rules. We'll be uploading that for comment. So I think in a month or two, we'll have the rules in place.
Right, so I think the next question is from Mr. Umesh, who's asking for a dedicated curriculum with marine propulsion system running on renewables into schools and colleges and also for the projects. So I think, I don't know whether we have anybody who will be able to, because none of us are into training. So, but I think it's a good suggestion. Probably the organizers can take this forward.
We could definitely pass it on to the IMU if they have any role at all. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. So, sir, this next question from Mr. Surya Prakash is for you. He's asking: are there any plans for implementing small wind turbines in ports or in standard vessels? Sanjay sir, this question is specifically marked it for you.
I don't know whether I really can answer this question in the sense that we could find out more on that. But
I think probably the focus more has been to use the surfaces available in the ports for the solar panels to be installed. I think wind turbines, as of now, I am also not personally aware. Maybe it has its own challenges.
If you want, I'll just tell you. There are 3 ports: the Tuticorin, Chennai, and Kamarajar port. They have a kind of wind energy target, but right now they aren't doing that much. Let's say they have a target of about 50 megawatts, which all these 3 ports put together, and these are the 3 who have that potential, so to say, to use wind energy.
So I think moving forward, once we have,
I could only say that these 3 ports may be in a position to give you a little more on the wind energy.
So I think moving forward, if you have more and more wind farms coming offshore, probably this could become part. This whole port ecosystem could become part of the wind farms itself,
right?
Rather than having one isolated turbine being installed.
No. Ultimately, when we say the feasibility part, obviously the feasibility part has to be first understood.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, how many states are covered in transportation, to be precise? I think this is again for IWIs. I think Mr. Sundar wants to know how many states is under IWI. I think that is also.
It will be pan-India. Wherever you have national waterway, the Act will be applicable. So
yes.
Yeah. But again, all the state bodies that are there in place, the regulatory bodies set up as a state, they will continue as before. So there is absolutely, this was a major consideration it excludes the fishing vessels, because then it questions, it's such a low-key thing, then it's a question of livelihood also at the bottom of the pyramid. So the fishing vessels are excluded, but otherwise, wherever you have national waterway, the Act is applicable.
Right. I can't see any more questions in the chat box.
I think that's the end. Probably there's one more. It's just thanks.
I think we'll just wait for a minute in case somebody is just typing. Or else we can just have a quick closing remarks from all the panelists before we close for the day, sir. And in case some questions comes up in that period, then we will just take up the questions. Sanjay sir, starting from you.
I would like to just say that one is that when we say we must have a gap assessment, so with the kind of targets we've proposed for ourselves, and I'm right now talking mostly ports, and that too major ports. So we have done this kind of a gap assessment where when we're discussing solar or wind or biofuels, etc., we now know what is the kind of scope and how we can fill in this gap. The methodologies or the technologies and all the processes involved, let's say, we need to get into a little more deep dive now, because at the port level or at the ministry level, in fact, there is enough impetus provided to this. The ports, some of the ports probably need financial help. Some of them probably need to get in touch with the right technology providers. And at some places where you have private operators, you cannot probably mandate everything, but you have to nudge them into it. So to have a clear blueprint of going ahead, we need to get everybody together. And I suppose whatever we've discussed today will definitely help us to push this further. Thank you.
Dan sir, from your side, any closing comments?
Yeah, I mean, I just take this the challenges before me, as Sethi said, to be an advantage that I can start everything anew, afresh, and it can't be a very top-down effort. If you want to green, otherwise it will just become another slogan, another target to be met. So there's a thing, you just hit the target, miss the point, win, Bevan. So you hit the target, you miss the point. So it has to be a bottoms-up effort rather than top-down. So all contract, everything that we do, we have to have this green element built in so that we are able to internalize it, and that will be our endeavor. And of course, thanks to forum like these, interaction like these, at least I know who to go to, who's the go-to person to solve all my problems. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
So, Dasgupta sir, Sandit, any closing remarks from your side?
Essentially, my point is that we need to look at the manufacturing sector afresh. And it is only through the development of the manufacturing sector we would be able to address and close the gaps. And this is one of the areas which we need to focus on. And I'm sure Mr. Sethi and Mr. Singh will be able to pull the right strings to ensure that the maritime manufacturing sector gets the push, and we can close the gap, either the target set or with regard to the comparison with the adjoining world.
Sandit?
Yeah, so renewable energy application marine transport is following just like the electric car industry. It's taking off. There are some sectors already where it is economical and it works. There are some where there is some hand-holding needed, which I hope all of you agreed, and something will move in that direction. And beyond that, some technology development we should push so that India has the technology play also, and not just a manufacturing play. Design and technology should also be a play. Yeah, thank you.
So, sir, I think my takeaway from this discussion in the evening probably moves towards an integrated approach by all the stakeholders. So probably we all have this habit of working in silos, which probably doesn't help the overall cause, while we might be champions in our own field. But somehow when it comes to the overall benefits being passed on to the final customer, or in terms of benefits to the environment and the nation as a whole, probably an integrated approach might give us much more fruitful results. I know that all of us, in whatever capacities that we work in our organizations, are doing the best But as Sethi sir already brought out that there are gaps, and what Jayan sir probably brought out is that it is like a fresh playing field for IWI, which probably has been in existence for such a long time now. They're going to seriously look at these gaps and probably look at how industry, the ministry, the port organization all come under probably under a unified domain where each of us get forums like this to discuss and deliberate and probably come out with solutions that is applicable across the spectrum. And of course, we all benefit from these discussions. Thank you so much for joining us today evening, sir. And thanks a lot Informa for organizing this particular seminar today. I'm very sure that I can see a lot of participants had joined in. They all benefited from our discussion in the evening. Thank you so much from my side.
Thank you.
Over to you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much to each and one eminent panelists for your valuable insights and your thought share. Mr. Sanjay Sethi, Mr. Jayan Singh, Mr. Jyotisman Dasgupta, Sandip Tandisheri, and our distinguished moderator, retired Commander Thomas Phillip. It was indeed an interesting session covering all the key aspects of the renewable energy and the shipping and ports domain. Implementing will be key going forward unless actions are taken to reduce the maritime shipping GHG emissions. Its climate impact will increase considerably, over long term as international trade expands. Ports are also central in facilitating the bunkering of the renewable fuels. We would in future like to organize many such programs for the maritime community. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of our audience who are here with us today, taking time off their busy schedule. We hope that you've enjoyed the program and had a great learning. Our second webinar of the Tri-Series would be on the marine robotics and automation. Same time next Tuesday. We invite you to register and joining. Till then, goodbye, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Banika.
Thank you.